You've been asking how I shoot my videos, what settings I use, how I work my footage in post, and I'm here to deliver. Let's go. So I'm here with Sara the Mist. Say hello.
Hi.
So we're here in downtown Reykjavik, Harpa Concert Hall. We're gonna do a little photo shoot. So I'm using this opportunity to do a little behind the scenes vlog and talk about my settings. So we've been doing some photo shoots in the past. Do you wanna share your Instagram handle?
Saramist89. Saramist89.
So this is my setup, the R8, and this is my camera bag. Very basic, lightweight carry, perfect for run and gun vlogging. The easiest way to shoot is to shoot just in auto mode, but it's a shame not to take advantage of the abilities of your camera. And you're here for the settings, because you want your videos to slay. So let's go manual. Bam! If you are totally new to shooting manual, fear not, it's not that scary. You will thank yourself for it later, and your footage will look better as you'll get better shooting manually. And you'll have people telling you, wow, what a great camera you got, in no time. But we all know the camera only serves as an extension of your epic skills. Let's start with the picture profiles. I'm going to give you two options. There is an easy way to do it and a little bit more advanced way to do it. One of them is the standard picture profile, the other one is C-Log 3. I almost always shoot in C-Log 3. I've recently started to shoot some things in standard picture profile, personal footage that I can share with friends and family, ready to watch straight out of the camera without having to work the footage in post.
Ik ben DJ. Jij bent de DJ. Goed.
If you like to get as much as possible out of your camera, you can go with C-Log 3. The C-Log 3 gives you a lot more range to work with, especially with dynamic range, highlights and shadows, and of course colors. But that is going to require a little bit more work in post, which I enjoy by the way. But if you're not ready for that yet, you can stick to the standard picture profile. I shot this video with Saramist in both C-Log 3 and standard picture profile. The clips will be marked so you can be the judge. Is the standard profile acceptable for you, or do you want to go that extra mile and get that extra video quality of all that sweet dynamic range and colors? So what you want to do is to go into the menu settings, red tab, go to number 4, and here you have the picture style, and right beneath it you have the Canon log settings. I'm already set to neutral. If you never messed around with those settings, it's probably still set on auto, but I recommend neutral. Neutral is the flattest image of the standard profiles, which means it has the most flexibility for corrections and color grading in post. If you want to go for the C-Log 3, just go down here, click, click, down here, and pick C-Log 3. Bam! I also recommend going into color space, click and go down to the cinema gamut, bam, because that will give you wider range of colors to work with. But you can also just use BT709 because it's a little bit easier to work with in post than cinema gamut. It all depends on your level and how far you want to push yourself, coloring your footage and all of that. Start easy if this is your first time doing all of those things. I recommend the standard picture profile set to neutral in the beginning and over time gradually work your way to C-Log 3. Log profiles are very flat and gray, not vibrant or colorful. But for a reason, all the information is in the footage that you can pull out of it when you work it in post. Standard profiles bake the colors and the contrast, the shadows and the highlights more into the footage. That doesn't mean you can't make adjustments to the footage in post, but you can just do so much more with C-Log 3. Because the log profile is so flat to shoot in, I suggest go into View Assist and turn it on. Bam! Right there, it's like an overlay of stronger colors and contrast on your LCD screen or viewfinder, assisting your viewing experience while filming, making it more pleasant for the eye, while the footage itself is being recorded in a very flat profile, with all that juicy information still retained within it for you to do your magic in post. Frame rates and shutter speed. That can be a deep rabbit hole, but let's not get lost in it, let's just keep it safe and simple. And let's focus on how to set the frame rates and shutter speed to make the footage look natural, just like it's being seen by the human eye. and how to get that cinematic slow motion B-roll, because that's actually a frame rate thing. Go to the touchscreen settings, frame rate icon, setup, and choose 4K 24 frames. Full HD has already become a relic of the past, and everything is shot in at least 4K resolution now. For slow motion, choose 60 frames per second and then modify the footage in post to play in 24 frames, slowing it down as a result. I'll explain that better later in this video. Shutter speed is pretty simple. Set it to double the frame rate. It looks like this. 24 and 60 frames is the NTSC system used in America and Canada. If you want to switch to the PAL system, which is 25 and 50 frames, because maybe you are located in Europe, you can go to the yellow tab, pick number 2 and click on video systems. It's very easy to Google which system your specific country uses. I always chose 24 frames because it is the industry standard for films, but I started to notice undesirable light flickers in some of my footage. After shooting lots of videos in the US and Europe, I learned that lights flicker at different frequencies in different locations, unseen by the human eye, but not to the camera.
Outfit change.
The trick is to sync the shutter speed to the flickers of artificial lights in the environment. And to keep that safe and simple, sticking to the settings presented on the screen will help avoid a lot of that flicker. Just keep in mind, some lights will always flicker more than others. So don't stress out about catching some of it, you just want to avoid most of it. IPB is bitrate, which has to do with how much the camera compresses the image. I recently started to use IPB Lite instead of the standard IPB because I can't see any noticeable difference in image quality. The video files are not as heavy to work with and they are half the size of the standard IPB, so it will not fill up your camera's SD card or computer's hard drive as quickly. Other content creators have also talked about this before. I want the most bitrate possible for professional work, of course, but for content I make for online, I've started to go with the IPB Lite.
Harpan was a success. Now we are here at the Pearl, doing a little location change before wrapping it up for the day.
This is the Aperture. The lower the number, the more light comes through the lens. The higher the number, less light comes through the lens. More light means brighter image but more blur. Less light means darker image but more sharper. I usually keep the aperture as open as possible. I want that cinematic looking blurry background, called bokeh or bokeh. But in bright daylight it might overexpose the footage. That's why I use ND filters on my lens. To put it simply, they work as sunglasses for the lens. It allows me to open up the aperture to the max and get that blurry background and not overexpose my footage. For nighttime, I can keep my aperture open without the ND filters. I don't crank up the aperture in the nighttime because the footage becomes darker and more noisy, and that's noise I want to avoid. You can crank it up in the daytime when it's more bright and you don't have any ND filters, but then you might lose out on that blurry background that you would achieve with the ND filters. ND stands for neutral density, and I have variable NDs, which means I can adjust the amount of light it lets through with a single filter instead of switching out many different fixed ND filters. My ND filters also have mist diffusion built in. You can get NDs with or without the mist diffusion and standalone mist filters. I just love that extra bit of cinematic look it provides. So I chose my ND filters with the mist diffusion to use in bright conditions, and I got a couple of mist filters with different diffusion strengths to use in low light conditions. Mist filters diffuse the light hitting the lens, creating this softer, more filmic look with blooming halation around lights and smoother skin tones. Filters are external accessories, not in-camera settings, but help with the exposure, image quality, and achieving more professional or creative looks. They are a big part of how I shoot my videos, so I wanted to mention them in this video as well.
It's like the CIA undercover program here. So many outfit changes in 10 seconds or less in public spaces. Totally different look.
ISO brightens your image, but artificially, so it can introduce noise and grain to your footage the higher you set the number. The recommended ISO for CLUG 3 is 800, which I stick to for professional work, but for vlogging I switch between 800 and auto when using CLUG 3 depending on the situation. ISO 800 for daytime and bright situations, and auto ISO for nighttime and darker situations. And if I shoot with the neutral standard profile, I just keep the ISO on auto. A little noise isn't a big deal for me when vlogging in situations where I have no control over light and darkness compared to very dark footage that makes it hard to watch. I choose a bright image over a clean image in very low light situations if I have to pick between the two. It's just more pleasant to watch. The ISO technology keeps getting better and cleaner over time, so it doesn't affect the video quality as much as it did before. White balance is the color temperature of the image, and its job is to capture true colors accurately. I keep it in auto most of the time. Little bit of color shift in the image when running and gunning through different environments is better compared to setting it on daylight, for example, when outside, or forgetting to switch it to tungsten when going indoors, messing up the whole footage in the process and giving myself a headache in post trying to fix it. My autofocus settings are whole area autofocus and subject detection set on people, because I vlog with my face. Maybe you make content about cats or cars, then you can switch to animal or vehicle detection. The autofocus is really impressive on this camera. Make sure you pick the whole area autofocus along with your subject detection. I made the mistake of having one point autofocus accidentally set on in the beginning of this video, and that point was located in the middle of the screen, so that's what the camera focused on, resulting in me and Sarah not being in focus. It was the holiday season, eggnogs every night and sleeping in every day. I had just woken up and still had crust in my eyes, so you could say my eyes were not in focus. I didn't spot it until the end of the day when I was looking at the footage. Sorry, my bad. Canon R8 offers digital image stabilization, and I always keep it turned on. It smooths out a lot of the shakes, it crops the footage a tiny bit but not too seriously. Enhanced stabilization is smoother but crops in a bit too much for me, especially when I use my main vlogging lens, the RF 16mm wide angle, because I want that decent field of view. The RF 16mm lens has no optical stabilization built in, so turning on the digital stabilization in camera helps a lot. If I use a lens with a tighter focal length that has no optical stabilization, like my RF 50mm prime lens, the enhanced stabilization is a great option. Camera shakes are more visible in tighter focal lengths, and since I'm going tight instead of wide anyway, that extra crop is not really a problem for me. Apart from my 16 and 50mm, all my other lenses have optical stabilization, and when I use them, I combine the optical of the lens with the standard digital of the camera. I'm just gonna show you a quick visual explanation of how I work the footage in post. I use Premiere Pro, but other editing softwares like DaVinci and Final Cut offer the same possibilities. I shot the video in 25 and 50 frames. So I start by modifying the 50 frames into 25 frames so they will play at half the speed. If I shot in 60 frames, I modify that to play in 24 frames. Pull the clips down here and a timeline will be created with the same frame rate. So the 25 frames will play normally and the modified frames will play in the smooth aesthetic slow motion. I use adjustment layers to convert, correct and color grade the footage. Place them above the clip, and everything I do to the layer will affect the clip below. I begin by converting the CLUG3 clips with a base LUT from Gamut. You can also download free conversion LUTs from the official Canon website. I go to Lumetri Color and choose the CLUG3 Cinema Gamut base LUT. Now the CLUG3 looks proper. Standard picture profile does not need conversion, so I delete the parts of the layer above the standard profile clips. I create another layer for corrections above all the clips, including the standard profile ones. I cut up the correction layers so there is one for each clip, because each clip might need different adjustments. I go to basic corrections in Lumetri Color, I bring up the exposure to brighten the whole image and pull down the highlights to recover information that might be a bit blown out. Shadows are the dark areas in the footage, whites are the brightest and blacks are the darkest. So it's possible to adjust all of those separately for balanced exposure. And this is the contrast. For more contrasty look if you pull up, or more washed out look if you pull down. I go back and forth between those sliders, by the way, until I achieve the balance I'm going for. Adjusting one can affect the outcome of the others. It's a creative playtime. I don't mess around with the white balance a lot if I nailed it in camera, but I can make the footage warmer or cooler if I want, pulling on the temperature or tint sliders. Saturation speaks for itself. It saturates or desaturates the colors. This is the before and after. It looks so much better. Let me work the standard picture profile clip really quick. As you can see, a lot can be done with the standard profile picture too. The next layer above corrections is for creative LUTs. Creative LUTs give the footage a certain look or artistic style. Recently I got myself the Faction LUT collection from Gamut, an innovative spin on the classic orange teal look according to the product description. So I want to explore that. It's a pack of 6 in total. I go through all of them and pick the one I like the most. Behold, the before and after. Creative LUTs are great for standard picture profiles, especially the neutral one. It gives you great colors straight out of the camera and decent flexibility in post, if you like that as an option. And finally, the last layer. I use a boost LUT, also from Gamut, to give the footage a little boost. You can see a subtle difference. The creative and boost LUTs above affect the correction layers below, so I like to go back and do a second run of corrections if needed. I also use tools in Lumetri scopes like waveforms to help me with adjustments. Not all screens are the same, and the one I'm using might display the footage differently than other screens. So instead of just eyeing it when I'm working the footage, I can read into the color and exposure information as I'm making my adjustments. It helps a lot nailing the correct exposure across different screens. One more thing, I sometimes add a little bit of extra stabilization in post. Not too much, because the more I stabilize, the more it will crop into the frame. It can help smooth out the shakes, but sometimes it looks weird. I stabilized some shots in this video. Maybe you caught a glimpse of something weird, like a wobble, but I do my best to keep it to a minimum. I go to the Effects tab, type Warp, and Warp Stabilizer pops up. Drag it onto my chosen clip, and it will start analyzing it. You can see how much smoother it is, but it crops in a lot. It's 50% smoothness by default. I always stick within 5 or 10% smoothness. That's enough to not crop too much, but still achieving decently stable footage if I did a good job holding the camera steady as I was shooting. This is my basic way of working the footage in post, to complement and complete the in-camera settings I use when shooting. I hope all of this makes sense.
It's a wrap. We are done for today. So make sure you follow me on Instagram if you want to see the results from today. And of course, go check out Sarah Mist on Instagram. Show her some love. She did a great job today. If you want to watch more of my videos, check out this video where I talk about this camera, reviewing it for vlogging. And of course, this video over here where I'm covering this lens, the 16mm, in combination with the R8 camera. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next time, peace out.